Okay, I am going to call the meeting to order, and there is no one excused, and so we'll go to the minutes from the last meeting for their adoption. Anyone feel like they can move them? Hubie? Hubie moves. All in favor? Opposed? All good. Post agenda items. I was just going to add the RMA resolution to that list. There's quite a list already. Any other additions to post agenda? Kelly?
I'm wondering if ICF committee wanted to have an in-camera portion. Okay, I see nods. It sounds like.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, an adoption of the agenda, please. Lionel moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Question period, notice of motion. I'm assuming there's no one in council chambers besides only Kevin. Okay, bylaws. Now, I had a Ariana sent me something saying that would happen at 1 o'clock. Is that correct still?
The road closure, yeah. We'll just do Devin and John, the two bylaws first, the campground and the aquatic.
Okay, thank you. So then we would go to item 2, bylaw. Okay, municipal enforcement officer, gotcha. Item 7.2.
Go ahead. All right, hello. So we're presenting today our second version of the campground bylaw. So from the last council meeting, a few changes were recommended. The changes were made. And we also sent the bylaw out again to the other campgrounds in the county and received feedback from Tilly. She provided some feedback and we reviewed some of the sections she had concerns with. Not really anything that needs to be changed. The only change we would have to make is just section 11.4 for vehicles. Just want to say, if applicable, just because that section has to do with parking, and all the campgrounds have designated visitor parking spots.
Thanks, Devin. Are there any questions for Devin? It looked like you've done a good job. Hubie?
The one about the dogs.
Yep.
She was talking about there could be dogs coming from the county or from the village of Tilly running into the campground, so not necessarily the campers' dogs.
Yep. Oh, sorry, I'm not sure if you're done yet. With that one, so we have the county animal control bylaw. The dog is at large in the hamlet. Then it's in violation of the county bylaw. So we have to still deal with that dog under that bylaw, just because the dog's off from the campground. I know where her concerns are. Generally, John and I will try and investigate and see where the dog came from first. And that's just a community thing, just contacting them. I let her know that they can provide contact information and work with them. So.
Any other questions? If not, could we have motion for second reading? Lionel moves a motion for second reading. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And mover for third reading? QB moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Mark, did you want to present your report? Is Mark in the room there?
I can do that.
All right. Okay, so Mark is going to present his municipal services report, which is item 11, so 11.2.
Catching me off guard, pardon me. What happened to my report? That's an even better question.
Gee, it's so good to see you disorganized, Mark.
Oh, I just got out of EOC meeting. I wasn't able to listen to this at the same time I was doing that. And yeah, I am a little disorganized. My apologies.
As I
Yeah,
said,
so,
it's really good to see you disorganized, Mark.
oh, I heard, don't worry. You know, really we're business as usual. We've been attempting to get our graders out on the gravel roads and stuff. There's lots of washboard, there's lots of potholes, particularly around those areas of calcium dust abatement treated roads. Weather with snowfall last weekend saturated the surfaces again. We're dealing with cold temperatures in the mornings, but grader operators are actually out there doing some work where they can work. So hopefully weather trend holds and we actually see spring come upon us and we can get them out more often and potentially extend the hours that they work to get things into tip-top shape as soon as possible. Vegetation management, tree cutting, brushing, stuff like that. Of course, there's legislation around nesting bird season, which is right now, mid-April and whatnot moving forward. So that's really coming to a halt for us. Truck drivers, they continue with the gravel stockpiling program. They've been doing excellent with that. Also flipping back and forth between ice maintenance and care of our paved highways and stuff as need be. What else we got here for highlights? Dust abatement program notices have been sent out to previous year applicants. Advertisements are being made through the paper. To reiterate and re-identify to council, it will be the last week of April that we perform radio advertisements. Kind of expensive way of advertising, so we keep that to the absolute last week, which usually catches people and wraps things up. We have our gravel foreman back on staff for the season, so got him orientated here this week and moving forward with the truck drivers. Seasonal laborers are scheduled to return late April, so we will be making some adjustments to how we conduct our operations with the current situation on hand and social distancing. One Tree Road rehabilitation strategies, pavement preservation report from ISL. I think that'll be coming to council here the second meeting of April, once Jeff and I get through that. Request for proposal on 15th Avenue, the partnership with Alberta Transportation, City of Brooks, County of Newell for the traffic control lights and lane widening there at the intersection. Closed. The evaluation of proposals is in progress and we will get information and award out following that. Highway 876 partnership on paving with Alberta Transportation is set to commence late May. That is all weather dependent for council's information. Staff have been working diligently to collect the location of all Texas gates located on County of Newell road allowances. We're in the verification process right now as to who has agreements in place for what Texas gates. Those that don't have Texas gate agreements, if it's on a quarter section line, you can be guaranteed that the potential four landowners around that quarter section boundary where the gate is on the road will receive notice and we'll be looking for somebody to take ownership. Otherwise, we'll have to consider what options we have moving forward, because I don't think that's something that the county wants to own, operate, and control, but hopefully people step up if they're the ones that need it. maybe they'll consider fencing off the remaining road allowance and a Texas gate won't need to be present in the future. I don't know, but time will tell. Municipal Enforcement Department, I think council's fully aware, maybe some of you aren't, but it was on the media that our peace officers have been authorized alternative powers to deal with the COVID, social distancing and things, as called upon through Alberta Health Services, the RCMP for assistance and such. So they're working through some of their standard operating procedures and guidelines and looking to have all the PPE measures in place if they are called into action for anything like that. But really, they monitored for compliance with the traffic safety plan primary focus, and with that issued 12 warnings, 3 tickets on various other things throughout the month. And we're continuing with the EOC meetings where the municipal enforcement supervisor is also the deputy director of emergency management, keeping up with things there, which thankfully our region is looking very good compared to others. And we did receive all 7 replacement half-ton trucks from the Enterprise Fleet Management Partnership that we've gone through. They are all in service. We are, however, waiting for the optimal period of time to look for resale values due to the current situation. So other than that, the permit activity report attached to the back of that, our numbers are down comparable to the 2016 period for April. And I'm not really sure what to expect, but we know that the economy is taking a significant hit, in particular the oil and gas sector, which is where a lot of our large overweight, overdimensional traffic comes from. And I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Questions? Tracy?
Morning, Mark. I was just curious, in your reports, there's always so many sign and post replacements. Like what is that, and like what kinds of signs, what kind of posts are we? It just seems like there's always such high numbers.
With that, a lot of it is anything that is damaged, defaced, aged, can be faded, anything like that that is just due for replacement. There are actually some standards in place for uniform traffic control devices with, I don't expect you to understand some of the technicalities behind it, but it's called retroreflectivity. So it's how much the headlights of a vehicle reflect that light back to the motorist oncoming at night. So you might be able to see a stop sign well during the day, but at night, perhaps that retroreflectivity isn't there. Perhaps the sign is faded. Maybe you see it better at night than you do during the day. But we deal with a number of things, and I guess I'll add to my report. We are identifying that people have more time on their hands. There is some defacing, some damage. Signs are getting shot up in some isolated areas right now that we are working again with our CPOs and our CMP. We'll be finding out as well. To try to keep open eyes and ears. We will be pushing something out on social media as well to try to flag those instances and have people call us and report. One sign, for example, the sign and the bolts are gone. So somebody's gone through the effort of actually getting up on the signpost and unbolting it and stealing it. So it's those sorts of things. Signposts, when you see a lot of those numbers, we've been working diligently to try to bring ourselves in line with some other side operations like agricultural services and the width of their mowers. So trying to get our signs pushed off the road allowance far enough that the mowers don't have to go around the signs or anything like that. They can just carry straight on through down the ditch. So making things as efficient as possible with that. But you're talking anything from your township and range road signs to your stop sign, your yield signs, curve signs ahead, warning signs and stuff like that for motorists, including information signs. So all categories.
Other questions? Brian?
With our enforcement upgrades for the COVID-19. What does that all include as far as what they've been asking our CPOs to do?
With the extension to the authorization and acts and stuff, really, my understanding is whenever there's a complaint about or concern of people not social distancing, our CPOs are required to be responding to those instances, whether it be issuing the warning notices or the fines, because the fines are now in place for people that are not practicing proper social distancing. If there are any concerns about businesses that are continuing an operation that are not identified as social or as essential services, that are still open to the public to come in and whatnot. Thankfully, we're kind of rural. Most of our businesses are really that industrial and commercial type, supporting industry. It's not, we don't have many blue jean shops and stuff like that. We do have a couple of convenience stores and stuff throughout our hamlets and whatnot, but those are the sorts of things that they're looking to take care of. And then, of course, anything else that Alberta Health Services or the RCMP might call upon for assistance with.
Thanks, Mark. Anything else? Yubi?
Mark, in the case of farmers trying to get into borrow pits with their tractors and backhoes trying to get water to drain, is there a rule or any fines where they can be fined for doing such things?
With farm fields and such like that, there is Water Act, of course. Everybody, I know a lot of people are still saying that they're not informed as well as they should be about wetlands. Wetlands are a very big thing in our region. I believe the claim was that 80% of the wetlands in Alberta have been lost in southeastern Alberta. A lot of that can be attributed to the development of and settlement of our region way back in the early 1900s, where land leveling for irrigation, flood irrigation, pivot irrigation and stuff takes place. If people are pumping water out of low spots in their fields, if they are running plows to get that water to drain, it is supposed to be reported to Alberta Environment.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Anything else? Mark, well, it's not in regards to, okay. Nothing else for Mark then. I don't think we're having, Cole isn't coming today from what I can see on the agenda. So were there any questions in regards to the other report for municipal services, utilities report, item 11.1? If not, could we have a motion to accept the municipal reports? Tracy moves. Thanks, Tracy. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And Mark, I have to apologize. You see, I had you hurry because I missed an item. So here I am hassling you about being disorganized. Would be me that's disorganized. We're going to go back to item 7.3, the boat safety and aquatic invasive species, for a first reading, and some information from Devin, please, on that.
Yeah, so this bylaw, we wrote it, working with the EID, so the EID board reviewed it. They're happy with it. I've done lots of research for provincial federal regulations across the country, make sure we're in line with what everyone else is doing. We had a Stringham LLP review it. They made their recommendations, which was also for it to be named Boating Safety and Aquatic Invasive Species Bylaw. They felt relying more with the Municipal Government Act if we threw some safety aspect into the bylaw. Yeah, with that for first reading, I'd like to go to public consultation for a little bit. see if they get some public feedback on our recommendations about it. Yeah.
Thanks, Devin. Are there any questions? Ellen?
Yes, for our CPO, just for clarification, is a floating plane an exception? Do they not have to follow the rules? Can they go from one water body and fly perhaps from another province or perhaps from the States onto our water bodies?
Yeah, that was a concern. We did have it in there, and then recommendation from legal was to have it ordered the bylaw currently. We could do some more research on it as well.
Mark?
To add to that, I did speak with Eastern Irrigation District staff. The board is comfortable with the way that the bylaw is written. The float plane situation, there are some instances around that may not make it easily identifiable for our officers to manage, or anybody else for that fact, because if they land in the middle of the lake, you might not be able to find the identification numbers on the aircraft anyway. But what was shared with me from the EID is there is significant consideration from those operating float planes that they have been calling the EID already, trying to do some of their own trip planning, find out where they can refuel and stuff like that when they are making those distance travels. And the EID is at least aware of some of those people that may be operating those float planes on the reservoir bodies that do exist. And therefore, I with the EID board accepting the bylaw as written, I have to assume that everybody's quite comfortable with that. But again, legal perspective on that shared with us that we shouldn't have that in there at this time. If council believes that we should be going back to legal with that for more clarification, we could seek that out if that's desired.
Wayne? Brian?
I was just gonna move first reading on.
Thanks, Wayne. Brian?
I guess I just wanted to add that if there is any concerns, I only know of one aircraft that does have floats that uses the Lake Newell, and that's the only lake that they use. So if there is any concerns or whether it needs to be inspected, that aircraft, I can put them in touch with them, with that operator. He's a local operator, and he'd be more than willing to comply, I believe. So just, you know, as far as enforcement goes, just get a hold of me and I'll put you in touch with the operator if there's any concerns.
That's good information. Thanks, Brian. And I'm sure Devin and Mark will remember that one. Kelly?
My question is around expectations. Once we pass this bylaw, are there expectations of the EID that we will be a certain number of hours or dedicating time to the investigation process?
Anything that would, I guess, be required to be any hours they already currently have contracted with us. So whatever time they want us to allocate to that, I guess we would be, but they already have that contracted time to them anyways. So I think they already understand where the time might be going.
So nothing more than usual as a result of passing this bylaw?
No, I don't have that answer right now. I'm sorry.
Mark?
I think this all just comes back down to the discussions that we've had previously with the Eastern Irrigation District. They had hopes that their board would pass a motion allowing a higher budget where we could entertain hiring an additional officer to help with patrol of their lands as well as things like this. They're still locked in with the hourly commitment that we have in the current agreement. So whether they want that investment of time in the AIS bylaw and safe boating, or whether they want that patrolling their land during hunting season or camping season and stuff. Our officers consult with them all the time, and we do is we act the way that they expect us to in that period. So.
Thanks, Mark. Tracy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had more, there was a couple typos that I had found. Under, on page 416, it was under point 5, launching of the watercraft. And under point 2, there it says of, and it should be if. And then under, it's page 7 of 16, under inspection. And at the first part of the sentence, there's an or in there, like the sentence doesn't make sense. And I think if you remove the or, then it would flow a little better.
I apologize. Which section, sir?
Under inspection, it's page 7 of 16.6.
Okay. Oh, yes.
That,
Yeah, it was a deletion error. You see, it did say an inspector or Eagle Eye. It was a misread on my part. Thank you.
okay.
Did you get, are there more, Trace?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Oh, perfect.
Devin, did you get all those?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Devin. Wayne has made a motion for first reading of this bylaw. If there's no further questions or comments. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. I see that our 11 o'clock delegation has arrived. And so that is item 8.1, presentation of the audited financial statements. So we'll move to that and welcome Avail here. And Matt, I see, is also in his office, looking tall and skinny like he is compared to the rest of my pictures here. All right, we'll let you gentlemen take it away.
Well, I'll pass the baton quickly to Darren. I think he'll do the presentation of the audited financial statements and probably open it up for questions. Big thanks to Darren and his team. They had a different approach this year where they front-ended a lot of their work, where we were able to supply sample items digitally, and they ended up just spending one day in our office this year. So thank you, Darren, and your team, and I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Matt. Good day, everybody, your worship, members of council. As per usual, we'll kind of go through what I think are the highlights of the financial statements, or at least that's what I'm proposing. I don't propose to go into any significant level of detail. I'll just try to keep it to the highlights. But of course, if you have any questions or comments at any point in time, then just let me know. I think I can just drag this over and share it on my screen. I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but I guess everyone's going to disappear. I don't know. Can everybody see that? Can you see the financial statements?
No, but we have copies.
Okay. There's much
So if you reference a page, maybe. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm having trouble getting it to open.
There's a button here that says share screen, but if I'm clicking it, it's not working, Matt. I'm not sure if
You should be able to do it now. We gave you presenter status.
There we go.
Oh, yes.
okay.
Perfect.
So you see the financial statements here?
Yep. Yes.
I lost a little bit of functionality in that my paging is going to be a little awkward, but I'll just have to scroll through it, but that's fine. So I guess some of the first thing is the independent auditors report. This is the same report that we had on there last year. It was new last year, a lot more expanded than it was in previous years. The important part is our opinion. It's moved to the top here. And our opinion is that these financial statements do fairly represent the results of operations of the county in accordance with public sector accounting standards. The rest of the report talks about some of the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance, about the auditor's responsibilities, and there's various responsibilities. None of those have changed, so I won't go through those. It also highlights two things in that you properly disclose your debt limit regulation and you properly disclose your salary and remuneration properly. So no surprises on the auditor's report itself. The management report is, again, the same report that we have on there in previous years. It will be signed by Kevin and Matt once everything has been approved. So then we get into the actual statements. So here we have our statement of financial position as of December 31st, 2019, and we can compare to 2018. So at the top, we have our financial assets, which are financial being cash or anything that will be converted into cash or cash equivalent during the year. 108 million up from last year's 98 million. So we're up about 9 million in total. The big changes are cash is up significantly. Cash is up about 23 million for two reasons. One is we had a surplus for the year of about 12 million. And the other one is we drew down our investments. So investments are down about 9 million and that just moved up into the cash line. So overall, our financial assets are up about 9 million. Our financial liabilities have moved from 22 million a year ago down to under 15 million this year. So we're down about over 7 million. The biggest changes there are in accounts payables. And that was just simply in the previous year, we had more holdbacks payable than we do this year. And then the biggest change is in long-term debt. So long-term debt, we made our regular payments, reduced our debt from about 15 million to a little under 10 million. So long-term debt liability went down by over 5. So overall, our liabilities went down by 7 million. Our assets at the same time went up by 9 million. So our net financial asset position has improved by about 16.5 million. So this line here is an indicator under public sector accounting standards as an indication of how well the county is situated in order to pay your bills as they come due. Very strong indicator. You have no concerns that I can see at this point. Then moving down, we add in our non-financial assets, which largely are tangible capital assets. Those changed slightly from last year. There was only 3 million or so of additions this year, 3.3 million, which is a little bit lower than typically. You typically have more additions than that. And then you amortized about 7 million. So bottom line, our accumulated surplus, when that's added in, is about 291 million compared to last year's 278 million. So it went up this year by about 11 million because we had a surplus of 11 million. So I'm not sure if you want me to stop on that. I'm going to really probably concentrate on this page and the next page as the highlights, and then skim through the rest of the statements in a little bit more expeditiously, I guess. So is there any questions or comments on that page? Okay, if not, we can always come back to it. So I'll talk about the breakdown of the accumulated surplus a little bit more when we get to the notes. So the next page then is the statement of operations or a statement of financial activities. This shows our revenues, expenses, and then other, so basically capital items to get down to our total. So for the year, we have $12,266,000 surplus. And how do we get there? Up top here, we have our revenues, our operating revenues, 41.6 million compared to last year's 40.1 million. So we're up a little over 1.5 million from last year. The biggest line item, of course, is property taxes. And normally that's going to be very comparable to the budget. But in this case, we're about 3.4 million under budget. And that's because of the shallow gas tax relief program that the province put in. So basically the revenue that would have came in under property taxes for those gas wells came in the government transfers. So government transfers is $3.4 million higher than budget, and taxes is $3.4 million lower than budget. So they basically just offset each other. So those don't really affect bottom line. What does affect bottom line compared to last year is user fees and sales of goods is up about 628,000. There were more wells drilled this year, so you had increased revenues there, and quite a bit over budget as well. And then the one other significant revenue item is in investment income. So that was up about 700, almost 800,000. So when you look at year over year, user fees are up and investment income is up. Expenses, very comparable in total to last year, 25.8 million compared to 25.1 million. So a $650,000 or so increase, which is basically a status quo almost in my mind on a $26 million budget. I can give you some highlights if you want, but I think for the most part, we're under budget by about $2.5 million, largely because of some projects for repairs, dust abatement, bridge work that were budgeted for that didn't happen this year. So we have our net bottom line accumulated surplus before the undernoted. So basically our operating surplus is about 15.8 million compared to last year's 15 million. So a little bit higher than last year. And then we add in other items, which aren't your typical operating items. The biggest one is the contribution to other governments, which is basically the county's portion of the highway paving projects. So the costs were split 50-50. And your net contribution this year was 4.4 million, less activity than the previous year. These highways, of course, are owned by the province. If the county owned the roads, then we would capitalize the cost, but because the province owns the highways, we expense these costs as incurred. And then a little bit of government transfers for capital additions. So net bottom line, surplus of 12.2 million. So this page here and the previous one really are the two most important pages, and they kind of give a summary, a high-level summary of all the details of the activity of the county for the year. Any questions or comments on that page? Okay, if not, that's fine. I'm gonna probably skip over some of the other schedules. Not that they're not important, but they really, a lot of them just give more details of some of the items we've already looked at. So our statement of cash flows shows our cash from operating activities generated a positive 22 million from operating activities, which is what you want to see. You always want to have positive cash flows from operations. And so you did have that. You spent a little bit on capital and you drew some out of investment. So end of the year, solid cash position. The notes, most of these notes I'll just skip through. The accounting policies here are all the same policies that you had last year. None of them changed. Some notes here on some account balances, which I don't really have a whole lot to add to. They're good notes. They're very descriptive and give you some details. But as far as me adding anything to them today, I don't really have a whole lot to add. One note though that I would like to have a look at a little bit is accumulated surplus. So the county has a total of $290 million of accumulated surplus at the end of December. And that's broken down into three different categories. Unrestricted, so that's unspent surplus that can be used for whatever is needed for. Restricted surplus, 96 million, that's also unspent, but it's been restricted and set aside for specific purposes, and those are listed out on the next page. And then another 185 million or 186 million of net assets that are invested in the tangible capital assets. So you have the assets and the service potential of the assets, but you don't have the cash. You can't spend that surplus again. It's already spent and invested in the capital assets. So I always like to split this part out, or just explain that this part is already spent, and these two amounts totaling, what were those total? About 105 million or so is available for future spending. A couple other notes that I would like to highlight. One is note 14, which shows the expenses. These are the same expenses that we already had a look at. They're just presented now by object rather than by department. And you can see there's not a lot of huge swings from one year to the next this year. No real highlights that I came across. So total expenses, again, very comparable to last year. Another note that I think is interesting usually is the debt limit note. So based on your revenues each year, the county can, without any additional permission from the province, can take on a certain amount of debt limit. And this year your debt limit is 62.5 million. Your actual debt is under 10 million. So you have almost 53 million of debt capacity. So around 85% of your debt capacity is unused and available for carry forward. The one other note, I guess, and it's no surprise to anyone today, but we have added some disclosures just around the whole COVID-19 situation that we find ourselves in. This is kind of a generic note, and we haven't really tailored it too much to the county just because there's so much uncertainty at this point. We do know, or I'm guessing that you're going to suspend some interest and penalty provisions and probably delay collections of some payments, but it will impact your cash flows. But as far as what the total future impact on the county is, at this point in time, it's really too early to tell. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about on the financial statements itself. Again, I'll open it up if there's any questions, or Matt, if there's anything that you want to add.
I think the only thing I want to add or point out, highlight again, is on the expense by object note 14 on page 18, under the other expenditures, budgeted 40 and it came in at 561,000. That is related to our provision for bad debts on the property tax side of things. So, that just kind of factors into what we're looking at moving forward. We had some write-offs last year. We're expecting more coming into 2020 before things went totally south. So that'll be one to watch.
If anyone has questions, I can no longer see you. So
I have a question, Molly.
oh, I can just scroll. I just figured out. Brian, go ahead.
On number 11, the accumulated surplus, we have one line item that says future projects. Can you remind me again what's all included in those future projects? It's $10 million there.
Maybe I'll let Matt handle that.
Yeah, you bet. So the bulk of that is funds set aside for retiring the debt on the rural water project. There's also some residual amounts from when we built the county facility. So there's some money there. There's also the gravel pit reclamation, landfill reclamation dollars are in there, as well as we're using that to save for our gravel crushes. So we've kind of evened out the cash flow. We save a couple years and then pull the cash out of that future project fund when we do an actual gravel crush.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Other questions? Kevin? Can't hear you, Kevin.
We'll try it from this one.
That's working.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank Avail for their work again. I think that they're great to work with. All of our auditors that we've had has been exceptional, and I think it's due to the finance team and the systems that are in place, and pretty proud of all of that. So I just wanted to comment on a couple things with regards to the financial statements. I know with the accumulated surplus of 12 million, it sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't in terms of what we have. I mean, we have over 275 million in capital cost assets. We only increased our asset value by 4 million last year. We lost some ground to our useful life that's left over. You know, I anticipate that that we're going to need to be over 12 to 15 million in order to keep above board with regards to our depreciation. We are over and above the municipal average. I mean, the municipal districts are at 55% depreciation, and we're significantly less than that. But it's a trend that we need to pay attention to make sure our operations are lean as Schedule D or the object codes that the auditors had spoke about. We are very lean there in terms of our municipal peers. I did show council a report at one point in time for over the 10-year period that we've saved over $50 million on average over that period from our peer group, and I think that's something to be proud of. But at the end of the day, municipalities need to operate efficiently for operating expenses, and they need to invest in capital, or we'll be caught into a game where our operations are high and our capital inputs are low, and we don't want to hit that. So $4 million in capital. This, of course, we've last couple of years, including this year, we have the paving of the provincial highways, which doesn't go on our asset register, so we have to keep that in mind. But the county itself had put in 36% over the 10-year term into our roads. Municipal districts and county average 50%, so we put in less to our roads than what our peers do on average, but be partly due with the life that's left in our roads, which is higher. Capital-wise, other municipal and districts and counties of the total capital cost assets were 74%, and we were at 50%. So to me, that tells us that we have room to invest more in our roads. And the last thing that I wanted to comment on, and I know Avail hasn't got to it yet, is their municipal indicators. And I mentioned it last year, and I'll mention it again. Population doesn't work for municipal districts and counties because we deal with roads and bridges primarily as our biggest expense, and it has nothing to do with people. So the 75 to 125 on population for municipalities really isn't a relevant number for us. So I hope at some point in time when they trend that they trend it on meaningful numbers so that council can see them. And that's all I wanted to add.
Thanks, Kevin. Any questions for Kevin? So was there other stuff from Avail today? Darren?
I know that I did send out the what we call our indicators of financial condition that Kevin just mentioned. And so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with those, but maybe I'll just spend a couple of minutes and kind of just show what they're about. So if we go to the very last page, it shows who we're comparing you against when we look at the different graphs. Comparables of same type. So these are MDs plus or minus 25% of population that are counties or MDs. So there's 13, including Newell. And then comparables of any type are the ones that Kevin, I think, was just mentioning that probably maybe don't pay too much attention to these ones. But I think the counties and the MDs, so if you look at the green line on the graphs, that's comparables of same type. So we are comparing County of Newell to same type of municipalities. Just a couple of the graphs I'll have a look at. So if you do look at, they're split out into different categories. We have sustainability indicators. There's a few graphs. So the blue graph, of course, is County of Newell. You have strong indicators on both assets to liabilities and financial assets to liabilities. So you score very well there. Some other sustainability indicators are the current ratio and operating expenses. Current ratio, you look a little bit down because the investments are included as a long-term asset and not as a current asset. So you've typically kept most of your cash invested to earn more interest. So it skews this graph a little bit. I wouldn't be concerned about that at all. And then the operating expenses compared to taxable assessment, you did have a blip back in 2017 because of the transfer of assets to the Newell Regional Services Corporation back then. Otherwise, expenses are very well in line compared to the taxable assessment, which is our measure of the economy. So you score very well on a lot of these indicators. And we have flexibility indicators. This one looks at how much debt you have compared to your revenues. You've been paying down your debt, so that's been coming down. You still have a significant amount of unused debt capacity, so this is not a concern as well. We look at, Kevin mentioned, I think this one is this graph here is looking at your tangible capital asset additions each year. So if you go back 3 or 4 years ago, you were putting in 27 million, 25 million, 17 million. The last couple of years have been lower than usual. So you haven't been putting as much into investing as much into infrastructure the last 2 years, but over a 5-year average, you certainly have. So you've been investing back into your capital asset pool on a more than the assets are depreciating. So you are investing in your capital assets at an appropriate amount. So even though this graph is a downward trend, if you look at it over a 5-year, if you average it out, you'd still be positive. And then the one other graph, there's a few other ones here, but like I said, I don't want to go through all of them, but one other one to look at maybe is under other indicators. And this one here, accumulated surplus available for future use. So if you look at your restricted net assets and your unrestricted net assets, you have about 105 million of your surplus that's available for future use. And again, that compares favorably to the comparatives. So I think that's kind of the highlights on that one. There's the other graphs are useful as well. I know Matt prepared something similar as well. So I think I'll leave it at that. I think that those are the highlights.
Thank you. Anything else from council? Questions? Or staff? As I said, I can't see you all, so I'm assuming no one is. Are we ready for a motion? Ellen? Do you have a question, Ellen, or?
No, I'd like to make the motion to approve the report. Is that what we need?
The motion is for the approval of the audited financial statements, I believe. Any further discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Darren. Hopefully, by this time next year, we'll be able to see you in person. That would be wonderful. Even sooner would be wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for having me. And I think that hopefully this worked out pretty good. I know we're all, or at least I'm still getting used to doing these virtual meetings. I've done quite a few lately, so I'm getting better at it or more comfortable with it. I would just like to say thanks to Matt and Stephanie and to all their team as well for their cooperation during the audits. Our audit students and team kind of see who's getting the county annual audit because they love working on this one because it's just great cooperation from your team and so thanks a lot, Matt, and Stephanie as well. So.
Thank you, Darren. And yes, we are all pretty proud of everyone who works for the County of Newell, and our finance department on this for sure.
You better go to Humboldt and
Brian?
Sounds like we should get a better rate.
Yeah, that's been factored in already, but I mean, we can talk about fees if you want. That's fine. If you do, let me know.
Dutchman, Brian?
I guess just one last thing now is just for logistics, because I'm not there to get everything signed in person, what we can do now is my assistant Rhonda will email to each of you that needs to sign. You can sign electronically. It'll all go back to Rhonda as one completed document. We can submit that to Municipal Affairs and get you your copies, either hard copy or just PDFs, whichever you prefer, or both. So Matt, you can let me know what you prefer on that. So that'll be the process, and that's totally acceptable to Municipal Affairs and Canada Revenue Agency and that kind of thing. So so that's all I had. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Matt. And I guess we'll carry on with Matt's other items on our agenda.
Okay, I guess I'll sign off now. So okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Darren. Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Yeah, thanks, you too.
So we will go backwards on our agenda now to item 7.7. I think that's right, Matt, isn't it?
We need to look at budget before we look at tax rates. I know they're related and one might influence the other depending where our conversation goes today. But if we can start at the budget item 10.3.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Perfect. Item 10.3.
Usually this is kind of an easier process, right? We usually know what we're dealing with some certainty, and approval of the final budget is kind of stamp it and continue on with the plan. I have included for council and the RFD a number of appendices with the final budget. There were a number of changes that were made. Most of them are highlighted here. Updating tax revenues based on our actual assessments, the DIP requisition, the school and seniors requisitions have been included at their actual amounts. The new police costing line that has come in for over $200,000 is our expected share for 2020. There were a few projects that council had approved. The Hort mainline expansion for the city of Brooks, which was just over 800,000, and the renovations for the daycare center. So those have been included. We've got updated paving costs for the provincial paving partnership. The Headgates project has been punted from 2020 to 2021. I guess there's timelines that we have to meet there. Jeff was saying we would have to get stuff done by April 15th, and that's obviously not going to happen this year. So we punted that one forward. And then a number of carry forward projects. Some of the highlights, an overall reduction in property taxes of 7% or 2.3 million. Even after adding the police costing and everything else considered in there, we're down on our operating expenses by 300,000. We've got significant spending in this budget, a capital spend of just about 9 million, transfers to other governments of just about 8 million for paving and the intersection improvements at the north end of Brooks. We're looking at gravel crush projects of 3.1 million, debt repayment of 3.5, and we're going to need to transfer 7.4 million from restricted surplus to balance the budget as it is presented here. That's kind of the high level of the final budget. I know the rest of my agenda items kind of talk about taxpayer relief and things that we can do to alleviate some of the pressure that's out there. But I'm open for questions on final budget if you want to kick it around.
Clarence.
So Matt, those items where there's those incentives or tax relief or whatever we want to call them, I get what word you used for, because of the situation we're in today, they're in the budget?
They are not included in this this budget. So if we were to pass this budget and then through our conversations the rest of the day, we wanted to approve a discount on taxes, we'd need to include that as an additional spending approval.
Other questions? And Matt, that would be put in as the biggest amount possible or some sort of average, because that's an unknown, correct?
Right, like in my RFD addressing the potential for a discount, you know, the high end based on 8% was around 2.5 million. I really don't anticipate, even talking to some of our larger taxpayers, that they're going to be able to even take advantage of that. So 2.5 million would be the ceiling using 8%. And I'm not sure if you're comfortable with 8% or if you want to play with those numbers, we can definitely do that.
Other questions? Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So we need a motion then to approve the final budget. Anne Marie is going to make that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Is there anyone, I mean, in favor? Do that again, Molly. All in favor? Thank you. Opposed? Motion is carried. So Matt, where do you want to go to next?
Let's go back to 7.7, the tax rate bylaw.
Okay.
So order of operations. Now that we've got a final budget in place, we can talk the tax rates that are required to support that budget. When we prepared our interim budget, we prepared it on the assumption that we would be taking a haircut on our assessment. That came through pretty close to what we had estimated. So our taxable assessments down overall 278.8 million from the prior year. That consists of 244 million in negative growth and 34 million in negative inflation. So I've attached a number of appendices to highlight some of the changes as they apply to the different assessment categories. If we left meal rates unchanged, we'd be looking at a decrease of about 2.34 million, which is pretty much what we had incorporated into that interim budget. So really, we're not dealing with a lot of shocks when we're looking at this tax rate bylaw. I've included a summary of the rates over the last 3-4 years and how they change. We have added the police costing as a separate rate. When that prints on the tax notice, people will see what their share of that police cost model is. The other thing I should probably point out is small business has been broken out. We have just over $77 million in assessment allocated to small business. What I did for that assessment category was looked at those properties that qualified as small business this year, compared it with those same properties assessment last year, and I applied the growth rate of 31% which was applicable to the non-residential assessment category as a whole. So we captured 31% of the growth in the small business assessment category and are collecting $19,000 more from that category than we did last year. So that's how I came up with the rate of 7.52. It's around 92% of the non-residential rate at 8.15. When you look at some of those appendices, Appendix B really highlights where the changes are. You know, we lost 295, just about 296 million on the linear side. Commercial sees an increase. The small business, I don't have broke out on this this schedule just because we didn't have that category last year. But really, that was the impetus behind having that small business category, is because we were expecting such a dramatic decrease in that linear category, that shift, like you see commercial, their assessment went up. Everybody who's left in that non-residential bucket is left to kind of bear the rest of the tax shift burden. But essentially, at the end of the day, we're raising the same tax dollars that we had prepared for in the interim budget. After subtracting, we had a school tax over levy last year of just over 80,000, and the province isn't going to pay 25% of their property tax bill. So that's another $12,000 shaved off. So overall, we're looking at really raising the same dollars in taxes that we were at interim budget time.
Questions? Tracy?
I'll go ahead and make the motion for first reading.
All right, Tracy's made the motion for first reading. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So first reading is all we do today, I believe. So carrying on, Matt, 7.8, is it?
Yeah, 7.8. So this is a new way of looking at the world that we currently find ourselves in. We have a relatively old tax penalty bylaw set back in 1996. Typically, we hit delinquent accounts with a 3% penalty June 16th for current year taxes, and then again November 16th we have hit with 8%, so 11% penalty if you don't pay your current year taxes. Given the cash flow crunch, and I've spoken to a few of our larger oil field players, one company that I spoke to called and said, you know, I hate having to make this phone call to you, but I wanted to give you as much lead time as possible. We've always prided ourselves on paying our taxes. We'd like to contribute to the community. We have no cash. We are negative. We're just letting you know now we won't be able to pay by the June 15th deadline. So that is really good information for us to have. Currently, we're in a good cash position. We have access to sufficient cash. I'm not panicked, but I do have a great deal of uncertainty regarding, you know, typically in June, we see our cash flow spike. $45 million comes in the door. We invest it. Now we're not certain. Our largest taxpayer is on a tax payment plan. So that's good. We've seen some money come in the door already. But then we've got the government with the school tax deferral and no details really yet on how that's fully going to roll out. And then some folks who are like the oil company just aren't going to have the cash to pay by June 15th. So the idea behind this incentive/penalty bylaw is if there's somebody out in our county who's in a position to cash flow their taxes, we want them to cash flow their taxes by June 15th. So that's the incentive piece. Let's get whatever dollars are out there in the door. Remove the penalty for June. That provides some relief, some deferral opportunity, as well as, again, in November, push that off to December. December, I think you have to have some kind of penalty to encourage those payments to come in. So we've suggested 5%. Maybe it's higher, maybe it's lower, but I think there needs to be a reckoning where we know going into 2021 really how bad things look on our tax collection side of things. So, you know, at the end of the day, I've highlighted what this bylaw should do. Enable taxpayers to defer payments for 6 months without penalty, reduce the penalties applied to current year taxes by 6%, reduce the penalty applied to all taxes in arrears, so that's in March of the following year, by 2%, and encourage those who can pay to pay, not to take the free ride on tax deferral options that are out there. So I'm interested in seeing you guys kick this one around and how comfortable you are with the idea. We did have a pretty good year last year with Tortson's well drilling program, and our investments did well. We kind of topped up that stabilization fund. So I think it's within reach to do something, but entering an uncertain time, I'm not sure how much oomph we want to put into things straight out the gate.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate your work on this and knowing that you are always concerned about our situation as a county. I'm not sure why you would think any of the rest of us would be smarter about this than you, but I'm certainly willing to listen to people's thoughts. Lionel, Brian. Lionel, I couldn't
Okay,
hear
now
you. You're good now.
I'm on. Yeah. So I really like this proposal, actually. I like the discount for anybody who is going to pay. Usually we don't seem to reward our best customers at times. So I really like that discount. I don't know if there's much more discussion, but I'm willing to make a motion for first reading.
Thanks, Lionel. I will note that. Brian.
Yeah, I agree with Lionel. I just I think that it gives different people different companies and different sectors of our ratepayers different options depending on their financial position, and I think that's always good to have options. So yeah, I was basically going to make the same statement as Lionel was.
Thank you. Anyone else? Wayne?
I agree also with this. I think this is just a step we're taking to actually try to encourage our ratepayers to keep going. And I know the economic situation is getting bad, but this could make it a little bit easier for a lot of businesses to keep going. So I approve of this also.
Great. Any different comments? Tracy?
Yeah, I like the deferral too, as well as the penalties. I know the feeling most people are, are gonna try to keep up with things, but there is that option. If you just can't quite cut it, then it helps those that maybe need that extra time. So yeah, I think it's good.
Yes. Good work, Matt. All right, I'm going to call the question on the first reading of this bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So for second reading, Kelly moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Consent. Brian moves. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing or hearing no one opposed, we'll move to third reading. Anne Marie moves. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right. Matt, did you have other stuff today?
Yeah, I've got one more here, 10.2 temporary payment and collection deferrals.
Okay, thank you. Item 10.2.
So this again is in response to our current situation with the pandemic. We've looked at some of the things that we might consider doing just to provide some temporary relief to our customers, our ratepayers. Some of the things that I've suggested considering is suspending the application of our finance charges on outstanding accounts, so accounts receivable and utility accounts, suspending transfers of overdue utility accounts to the tax roll, and suspending the initiation of any new collection activities on delinquent accounts. We have been sending some things, more things to a collection agency lately. That seems to motivate payment. So we're suggesting that we suspend these things and that they remain in place until the end of August. That would provide up to 145 days of relief. In terms of the impacts to our cash flows, we forfeit a little bit on our finance charge revenues. Typically, $4,500 on utility accounts and $1,000 on general accounts receivable. Main impact will be on cash that flows in when people typically pay their Hamlet utility bills, and each billing is around $105,000. So depending on how many people take advantage of this, we could be looking at forfeiting cash flow of 105, 210 over both billings that will take place over that time period. So I don't want to say it's insignificant, but our cash position would be sufficient that we can offer this to our ratepayers. The other item that has come up, I don't know how deep we want to get into looking at our schedule of fees. I know the city looked at their development permits and they forfeited their 25% share of the development permit fee and a number of other things. On our utility side of things for our non-residential hamlet water users, we do have a base rate that is double for the non-residential compared to the residential base rate. So that could be another opportunity, looking at our schedule of fees and reducing some of the fees there.
So Matt, that would be separate from this?
Yeah, I could bring it back to the next meeting if that's an area that council wants to dive into further.
Okay. Claire?
Well, I'd kind of like to have at least a discussion on that item, Matt, this time around. I received a call from our local Treasury Branch Credit Union person the other day that she thought that her utility rate had almost doubled. And it was because we had not categorized her before as a business, but as a residential. And from talking to Matt, a number of these have occurred where we just missed them earlier, and it's kind of a really unfortunate. It's coming at a terrible time, and for these small businesses in our hamlets, be very honest, I forgot that we actually could charge them double for water and not for sewer as far as their base rate is concerned. And it's not a lot of money, but for these people it is when they're, even in good times, they're struggling. I'm not totally sure of how many types of small businesses we have in our hamlets, but there are a number of them that were paying a residential rate rather than a commercial rate. For this particular individual, her last year's bill was around $125 with the small increase in utilities. This time she got a bill for 2 months of $200 and a little bit over $200. And anyway, it just, to me, it was unfortunate. We had some communications problems that happened there that within office, probably because of the situation our staff is in right now, of not being able to see each other all the time. So I really would like to have a little bit of a discussion how we feel about that. Maybe Matt has some more information on what type of businesses we're really talking about. I know in Rolling Hills, there's 2 of them that fell into that category of all of a sudden finding out that they should have been paying that rate for the last 7 or 8 years. And now it hits them this time and it's, I don't know, I just find it a bit hard. We all like our businesses in the small hamlets. Important for our people in the areas, in the rural areas. I don't think there's a lot that are making a great deal of money. And I think maybe we should be talking about whether we should be dropping that doubling of the water fixed fee. I'd just like to know how council feels. Matt, you can elaborate a little more if you want, but I just think it was really bad timing in this particular issue.
Yeah, I agree. On the non-residential side of things, there's only there's less than 20 ratepayers throughout the county that pay that double charge. So doubling that adds another $417 to the annual utility bill for a non-residential commercial property there. So, you know, if you drop that, we give up around $8,000 in utility revenues. It's not going to sink us. It is another way to kind of provide some relief. It has been a long time since we revisited that doubling of the base rate that came in back in 2014. So it's definitely something to consider and something that we could do something about if council wanted to.
Kelly?
I would have to agree. I've always felt, going back to my other job again, I've always wondered why it costs no more to pipe water into a business as it does to residents. And in fact, they would, you know, on the user side of things, they would use less. The flow would be much less. So I'm all in favor of flattening that curve, or that's the new term now. Not discriminating against our small rural business to our residents.
Brian?
Well, I guess I have a question, and it's mostly in regards to what the service is providing and what the customer is using. Do they have a significant higher usage rate that would justify that higher rate? And I know maybe that's a too general question because there's different businesses out there that would use the services differently as far as water and sewer. But I guess for me, it's going back to the user pay. If you are using more of that particular service, you should be paying more, but not necessarily at this point in time, because as that's been indicated, is probably the timing is bad. But as we move forward, how do we justify the increased rate?
Yeah, and there's a real range of usage on the non-res side, right? So you've got Rolling Hills Agency that most of their bill is made up of the base charge. They've got very, very minimal water usage. Like it hardly, their usage hardly registers versus somebody like Tilly Car Wash, where their business is running water through kind of a thing. So, but we've just got that one non-residential category to double that base charge on. So everybody kind of gets caught in there. On the usage side of things, we catch most of that through the per cubic meter charge.
Clarence?
So just to give you an example of the bill, because we charge double we just charge double for the base rate. So the base rate for the hamlet was in 2018 was $66.22. This year it's $69.50. I don't think she's complaining about that small increase. She didn't complain about small increase we gave to sewer, which was $2 or something. I forget what it is, but the base rate just wasn't that bad. The part that really got her, and I think there's more in her position. Matt, maybe you can give me that number later, how many were actually still paying a residential rate there where it wasn't doubled that we hadn't caught. So she's paying for the present bill $139 for base and uses 4 cubic meters, which amounts to almost not even $10. So for a person like that, it just looks huge. But when we get something we should have been charging all along, haven't been charging, and now it hits you. So I just don't, I don't know how many small businesses are in that position, but if they're using more, that usage rate should be catching it. The base rate is pretty substantial already compared to most of the usage, so I just think we have to drop that doubling of.
So we should be looking at that separate from other things we're doing then, Matt?
Well, if the direction is to drop that, I can certainly have that on that amended bylaw on the next council agenda. That'll be timely enough that we catch it before our next utility billing goes out. And to Clarence's point about how many others there were 9 in total. So as part of the year-end audit, Avail, they choose a sample of the different revenue streams. They selected a utility bill that should have had a commercial rate applied. It didn't. So we thought, well, if there's one, how many more are there? So we did our internal audit, found the other 9, and those were adjusted for January 1st this year.
Kevin?
No, see if you can hear me this time.
Yep.
I can remember when we had these discussions
real feedback.
I'll go over to the other computer. Sorry, I was just gonna comment, I remember when we dealt with this in 2014, I think, originally. And there was, discussion, we had talked about potentially doing recouping revenues based on size of service, but that really doesn't apply to rural municipalities, especially hamlets that are different and with our drip system to rural ratepayers. So I think it's a good idea to get rid of that and charge by the cube. I know a number of municipalities charge more for the amount of use. For instance, a hotel or a car wash uses a lot more water than an office does. But we're really not in that business of rationing, and NRSC has enough water, so more water sales helps them and helps us. So I think it makes sense from our perspective to simplify that, because we only have how many, Matt? 17 or 18?
Yeah, there's 17 total.
Yeah. So I think it'll be a fairly straightforward discussion, but some of the rationale was based on the size, and it does add in a typical service. It does add if you're servicing with 1 inch or 2 inch services or 1.5 inch services, that increases the size in the street. So there is methodology to having a higher service for a bigger user, but in our perspective, I don't think it's a big deal.
Any other comments? So if I've got this correct, we can move forward on approving temporary payment and collection deferrals as presented and wait on this other item for next time, Matt?
Yeah, I'll bring the schedule of fees to the next meeting with the amendment.
Okay. But we do have on item 10.2, the temporary payment. And so we need a motion to approve this, Matt? As presented?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Kelly moves. Any further discussion?
Mhm.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. It is 12:10 on my computer. So how much time do you guys want for lunch? Till 1? Or how about we go 1 o'clock?
Okay.
Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. See you at 1.
Okay, bye.